Hello everyone, this is Shekhar Gulati, CT of Zebia Global Services. From today, we are starting Zebia Software and Architecture podcast, where we will have conversation with fellow industry experts on the latest technology and architecture style. We will cover best practices to use these latest technologies and architecture style. Along with best practices, we will also cover the NT patterns. We believe it is very essential to know when not to use a technology. So we will talk about both when to use a technology and when not to. Today I'm joined by Akshay and Rahul, my two colleagues at Zebia. We will discuss about different API styles that we at Zebia are using and across the industry people are using as well. We will mainly cover REST, GraphQL and gRPC. Akshay, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Shekhar. Good to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Akshay Mathur. I work with Zebia as a technical architect, primarily focused on API development and integrations.
Rahul, can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Rahul. So I've been working with Previa for a couple of years now, and I am working as a capacity of technical architect, working along with our customers to deliver the required solutions.
Thanks, Akshay and Rahul. The way we have structured this podcast is we will start by setting up the context. So I will do that. And once we have set up the context, we will talk about different API style and their use cases. So we will have a discussion among us where we will talk about that. So without further ado, let me kickstart that. We all know APIs are everywhere around us. They are the essential pillar on which our world exists today. If you look at any web application that you use today, be it consumer facing application like Twitter or Facebook or your enterprise application, you will find that you are using an API to get the data and to take any action. So there will be an API server running in some data center or cloud. SmartPeer did a survey in 2020 where they found that 72% of the organizations are developing internal and external APIs. The reason they are doing that is either for making sure that they can reuse their business logic by exposing them as service, or to integrate between different teams for integration between tools and systems, or to extend functionality. So APIs are prevalent in all these systems that we are building today. Another reason APIs are becoming a lot popular is because of the adoption of microservice-based architecture. So microservice-based architecture is an approach to develop an application as a suite of small services, each running in its own process and communicating via API. Typically, these APIs are HTTP over JSON APIs. If you want to understand the evolution of the APIs, you will have to date back to 1980s. In 1980s, the way we people were exposing the functionality to each other was using the RPC-based mechanism. Then in 1990s, we saw Corba come into picture. Late 1990s, we saw SOAP came into picture. Because of the problems or the complexity of the SOAP, REST was introduced in 2000, which was based totally on HTTP. Now we are working with REST for last 2 decades. REST has some obvious disadvantages or some problems, and to overcome that, GraphQL was created by Facebook in 2012, and they open sourced in 2015. And gRPC was also developed during the same time after 2010. Today we will discuss about REST, GraphQL, and gRPC. So we will not talk about other API styles. We will only focus our discussion there. We all know REST is very popular. So if you are a web developer, I am assuming most of us, you will have already built a REST API. Most of the frameworks, most of the languages that we use today have support for the REST API. REST uses HTTP semantics to define the API. We use HTTP method and response code to define our API. Let's take a small example. If we have to get something from the server, we will use the get method, and we will typically return the response code as 200. We will use post to create something on the server. We will use put to fully replace a server, patch to partially update a resource, and delete to completely delete a resource. GraphQL is another way to define API, and it was developed to overcome the limitations of the existing web APIs like REST. It was created in 2012 by Facebook and released as an open source project by Facebook in 2015. Since then, we have seen its exponential growth. community has adopted it in big numbers. We are seeing organizations like GitHub and Spotify exposing their public GraphQL APIs so that developers can start consuming them. We also have seen a lot of community innovation in open source, as well as there are organizations built on top of GraphQL tooling. gRPC, on the other hand, is quite different from REST and GraphQL. It is suitable for the efficient service-to-service communication. Again, we will discuss that later in this podcast in detail, but its use case is not web as it is. It's more on the service-to-service communication. These days, we are building microservices, so to between these microservices in an efficient manner, we need a lightweight mechanism, so gRPC helps there. All of the three API styles that we discussed, REST, GraphQL, and gRPC, they all support contract-first development. They all support us to define the contract in a language. Typically, that will be a text-based document that you will create. In GraphQL and gRPC, that's the default that will happen. In REST case, REST typically started where developers start hacking and building the web application by defining the resource, and then they use their tool to create the REST API specification from that. So if you're using Spring Boot, you might have seen the annotations that people put on their REST controllers to create the API contract of Swagger. But we believe that the best way to design an API is through the context-first approach. So you have to take that. And with gRPC and GraphQL, that's the way. With REST, you can take both the approaches. With OpenAPI and Swagger becoming the predominant way to do API specification in REST ecosystem, we can use them to define the API contract first, and then we can define the code for that. The main reason contract first is the right approach to build API is that you will not think in terms of the implementation, you will think in terms of the behavior that you want to achieve. So you will think in terms of the experience of your end user, and that helps a lot. Just to end my brief introduction, I will quote Joshua Bloch, who in one of his talks talked about how to build great APIs. So the main point in his talk was that a great API should make it easy to do the right thing and make it really hard to do the wrong thing. And API design is like an art, so it takes a lot of time to get it right. You have to do multiple iterations on top of it. So it's more like a UX that you are building for your API, and your end users care about that. Your end user could be your clients, like web or mobile, or it could also be the developer as well who will be using your API. Now that we have covered the context and we have covered the brief introduction about all the three API style, Akshay, in your view, is REST dead? Are there still use cases of REST? If yes, where you will use REST today?
I mean, REST is definitely not dead. It's still going strong. It will continue to stay the course. If you look at some trends and surveys, if you look at Google Trends, for instance, it's still at the top. There's a large gap between REST and then after GraphQL and gRPC are much behind. Or if you look at the Smart Bear survey, REST is at 82%, and there are other HTTP styles, and GraphQL is like 19, 20%. gRPC is less than 10%. So that's kind of what we see from all these surveys. For instance, the Rapid API survey as well has similar numbers, just in terms of the comparative adoption of GraphQL and gRPC in production compared to it. Now, again, obviously, you're not going to have one API style in any organization. You will have different styles, as their strategies evolve. But REST is easy. It's part of the popularity. Whether you do design your sort of schemas or your entities or not, it's easy. It's never been easier to spin up a REST API for a developer. Certainly in the new microservices world. Also, it sits directly on top of HTTP. There's not a lot of other boilerplate, right? It's just part of the infrastructure itself. So it's easy. Also, it can support stuff like web caching. So the default choice for building an API would still be REST, I would say. It's not as complex. You need a lot more upfront design to adopt these styles. REST is easy. REST, you can model your database directly as CRUD operations. It's not complex.
True. Rahul, so do you want to add something on it? So what's your opinion on REST?
Yeah, in my opinion, I completely agree with what Akshay has said. So it was easy to design applications over REST. And HTTP is the glue for your kind of microservices, because we are building many components, and how do we bind it, because that's a really hard problem, and HTTP by default gets you there. But by picking HTTP and REST, people have done it in various ways, and that is where the REST has matured. So we talk about the Richardson maturity model, where people started at level 0, where they build a basic services. At level 1, they started using some URIs and with the post method, and then suddenly they realized, okay, that may not be the best thing, because HTTP gives you a different verbs. And then you try to model those operations along with those HTTP methods. And then you start modeling that CRUD operations. And that's what most of the people have been doing. But at level 3, if we talk about, so you would have hypermedia links. So that would guide you, like we are starting, depending upon your context, they would give you where do you go from here. And I believe that we have been, like, most of our applications are at level 2. Like a large number of applications are still catching up with level 3, and with increasing amount of cloud adoption. So like people are now adopting more and more cloud and building SaaS based applications. So level 3 is what people we are starting to see more around. Another thing that I would like to quote here is, like a couple of years back, we had it like web components. So web components was a kind of a way of building the UI. So if you would like to build a UI, you would like to pick one thing, another thing, and try to build it. And that is what the level 3 would give you, because that gives you the context. So you are sitting on an API, from here you can go to another level, and that is what people are still trying to do. So in my opinion, so REST is still relevant, and it has a way to go. So where we are talking about now, we have shifted from monoliths at the back end to monoliths at the front end. And this is where we are more talking about how do you do with micro front ends, another way of building these web components using the hypermedia resources that are shipped along with REST.
And what do you, Rahul, just to cut here. So what do you think is the story of testing in REST? I think that is one of the key points. So testing is very much easier. So what do you think about that?
I think with REST going around, so REST was pretty easy because HTTP was easy. So you just do a kind of a request, and all the tooling was developed there. So you do a curl or a wget, and then you get it. So the testing of REST is easy. So you have a kind of a protocol. So you would like to say that I'm kind of shipping the data in JSON format. You can make a kind of, in languages like Java that we work, so there is REST assured as a library. You would directly hit it, and the standardization of HTTP status codes allow you to do the basic kind of assurance check. So if you have a 200 or you have a 400, and then you could validate the data as well. From a testing perspective, REST gives you all the flexibility that you would like to have. It gives you the mock servers that you would like to build just to validate your UI. With kind of at the level 3, if I talk about the current wave of REST adoption, so the contextual and the ideal kind of a thing. So that is what the APIs would look like, that you are calling it, and then the next level is kind of the contextual API, and that is where REST would shine. So my take is REST would help you get that easy. So the testing stuff is easier in REST.
Okay.
So one thing that Shekhar, I would like to ask you. So we have covered REST, so we have discussed REST. So what about GraphQL? So at the beginning of it, you gave a history around GraphQL. So again, a question back to you is, I would really like to know what are the problems that GraphQL was created for?
True. I think that's a good question, Rahul. I think we have to go back into the history again. Let's just try to understand where GraphQL was created. So I talked about that in 2012, Facebook created it, but why they created it? I think that's the story that we want to understand. So in 2012, if you go back 8 years back, you will know that Facebook was struggling with their mobile strategy. So they had a web UI or the web client that everybody was using, but for the mobile application, they were again relying on the web. So they bet heavily on the HTML5. And if you are old enough, or if you have been in industry long enough, you know that Mark Zuckerberg made an interview during that time where they talked about that betting on HTML5s was the biggest mistake of Facebook. They went with the thinking about we should build the native mobile applications. But there was one more problem that Facebook was struggling, or many organizations, even Google, Netflix, other organizations were also struggling at that point of time. The problem was how to work efficiently with on these mobile devices or play console or other things, because they are very different from your desktop or your laptops. They don't have those many resources. They have different form factor, and you want to develop UI or render UI in a different way. To understand that, let's take an example. You are an e-commerce store and you're building an API which gives you the listing of the products. Let's take a simple example. If you're building a RESTful API, what you will do? You will define a route called /API/products. When you will make a call to that, you will get a product listing. And what you will have in that product listing? You will have probably an identifier, an image, pricing information, reviews, and all those stuff along with that. So you will have a lot of metadata coming with each of your product listing. Now, with web application, it's totally fine. You have resources, you can render it easily. But think about the low-end mobile devices. They all face issues with the network. They all have less processing power. So there you need to have a different approach. And for that, you need to have a different way to build that. Now, if you think in terms of the REST API, how can REST solve that problem where you have a different consumer which need probably less data or data in a different format? What you will do is you will define a different route like /API/mobile/products where you will get the data for the mobile. Then you can do anything that you want to. Or what you will do is you will just have a single API and you will just return that data back and the client will figure out what it has to do. Or the third, which again few organizations did, was they defined something called a sparse field sets. So what you are doing is in your query parameter, you are also specifying what data I want from the server. So you will say that I need probably the product name, I need the product price, I might need probably some product description. I only need that. So you will define that in a query parameter. Now, as you can see, REST does not give you a way to handle such situation. Another use case, if I talk about in REST, is how do you design APIs which go beyond the CRUD nature of REST? So REST is very useful when you have a resource and it has some operations which fall under the get, post, put, patch, and delete. But there are times when they don't fall. Let's take a very simple example. Let's take an example of GitHub. If you go to GitHub API, let's assume GitHub has a concept of issues. So every repository has issues. Issues can be locked and unlocked. Now, how do you define an API for that? Right. REST does not tell you anything about that because the operations that it has is basically just get, post, put, and delete. Now, then you really have to think about how you will design those APIs. So there REST struggles. So the model of REST basically becomes very limiting. So a lot of organizations were struggling with that fact. Now, Facebook created it during that time because they wanted to solve this problem. So they said that we will totally deviate from REST. We will only use one REST method. We will only use one HTTP method called post, and we will give you a JSON specification. So what we will do is we will specify what we want to query or change in a JSON document. You will have only one endpoint. You will receive the JSON, you will materialize it, and then you will take action on top of it. So now you don't have to think about whether to use get, post, put, and delete. You only have a one endpoint. Again, there are issues with that as well, but it simplifies things in that context. Now, what you do with GraphQL is that you start by defining your contract. And the way you define the contract in GraphQL is that you use GraphQL schema definition language, which is GraphQL SDL, which allows you to do three things. It allows you to query stuff, it allows you to mutate stuff, and allows you to subscribe to stuff. It has rich type system, so you can use the scalar type like string, integers, booleans. You can also define your own objects which will be composed of the scalar types. You can define abstract types. You can use enums. You can use union. There are multiple of options there to define the API in a way that you want to. So GraphQL solves the problem by having all these things. Now, Akshay, I talked about few of the things that GraphQL gives you, but in your opinion, where will you use GraphQL over REST?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on quite a lot of those. Now, the interesting part is, it's a flexibility for one, because REST is very server driven. If you're at level 3, as Rahul said, HateOS and everything, all of that is server driven. That is things the server gives you. You can only navigate the links or the relationships that the server itself has returned. By contrast, GraphQL is far more client driven. The client specifies what they need, and then they just get that back, which obviously makes it more mobile friendly as well. With REST, for instance, because you want your mobile payloads to be slightly different, right? The behavior of web and mobile can and should be different. You might have had to build separate gateways or separate backends for front ends, as they call it, BFFs. With GraphQL, all of that is simplified. It's just one unified endpoint, and then the clients can kind of ask for what they need. Not that you couldn't do that with REST, but GraphQL makes it so easy. It's sort of first principles there. And obviously that comes with the API aggregation goodies that we need. The part I really like is the strong typing. With REST, there's the flexibility to do whatever you want. You should do things the right way, have a nice entity model, proper endpoints. But if you don't, no big deal, REST won't blow up. GraphQL just does not allow you to go the wrong way. You have to define your strong types. These are also introspective by default. It gives you that nice graphical editor where you can actually explore your schema, at runtime and figure out what your query should look like. So in terms of typing, I believe APIs should be strongly typed as much as possible. So it's out of the box with GraphQL. It kind of enhances developer productivity because of this. Because traditionally, if you look at enterprises, unless you've adopted Swagger or OpenAPI, made it a standard, there's no clear way on how should teams interact, or even backends and front-end teams. What is the API contract? Ideally, you publish it somewhere, but there's always a back and forth. With GraphQL, the nice thing is it's baked in right from the start, and then you ask for the fields that you want. It raises this interesting point with versioning, right? There's no clear, consistent standard for how to version APIs with REST. People have adopted different approaches over the years, have contained type, use type negotiation, or just you put a /v2 in your URLs. GraphQL just does away with all of that confusion. They say don't version it, deprecate certain fields if you want, but then it's client driven, so you just ask for what you need. That brings us to an interesting point. So talked about GraphQL and REST. How about gRPC? Rahul, what are your thoughts around that? We kind of see what gaps GraphQL addresses, but how about gRPC? Why have people adopted that?
Okay, so I would give you a little bit history around why was gRPC kind of put in first place, as I understand it. So because we have been working for the RPC kind of for quite some time. So previously we worked with Thrift, and Thrift was very good for us in certain applications. And what we find that RPC is usually a good fit to express a domain. So you could very well express an API, and the API can be very much contextual, and it is kind of bounded to your business domain. So it is a very good way of expressing what do you want to do, and I think that's why Google has been using it. I think it's a known fact that gRPC was kind of based on Stubby, which was used in Google, and Google wanted to build an API that was lightweight, open source, bidirectional streaming, HTTP platform kind of a thing. So if I talk about, being HTTP platform is one of the most important keys aspects, as I understand, because when we worked with Apache Thrift, so we used to build servers that used to work on different ports, so different kind of, and then the security team would need to go back and think around, okay, now we need to put in a security policy and around it and try to restrict that access. But if I talk about HTTP like works on 80 port and the 443 port. So if you are working on HTTPS, so it would be by default 443. And if I talk about gRPC, it works out of the box on HTTP. And that is what one of the kind of, I think, the challenges that Google solved it out. So how to get a kind of RPC framework working on HTTP. And I think that while doing so, they realized that there were certain shortcomings which HTTP won. So the payload was kind of a little higher side for them, and then they came up with another protocol that they called it a Speedy protocol, and Speedy did quite a good things for them. So I think it manipulated HTTP traffic by reducing the web page load latency and improving some amount of security, because by default everything was encrypted there, kind of things. And these principles were the foundations for the Google's version of gRPC, because again they were working with this to get whatever things they wanted to work with the gRPC. More importantly, these Speedy protocols laid down the foundations for HTTP2. The 2.0 version, HTTP kind of is built upon the principles that were laid by Speedy protocol, and by default that is why gRPC works over HTTP2. So again, initially, I think the protocol was built to service interactions, because it's a binary protocol. It uses kind of protobufers as its kind of a payload. And just to quote here is that protobufers is not aligned to kind of gRPC. Like you could use gRPC with another kind of a protocol, with another kind of encoding as well. I would put it that way. Protobuf just works out of the box, and you could use protobufs without the gRPC need as well. So it's a separate project in completely together. And the bindings are, so when you work with gRPC, you again work with a kind of interface definition language. So you build out an interface, and then there are many languages in which it can be converted into a kind of a generated stub, and then you try to implement it. And there are many languages. So most of the kind of server-side languages have support for it, be it Java, Python, Go, or even Node.js. So it is interesting to note that the gRPC has an implementation for Node.js, but still gRPC doesn't work for the browser. It is kind of good for service-to-service kind of a communication, because having it in a browser is a separate story. So in browser, so the browser needs to implement the HTTP protocol, and then even if the browsers have implemented the HTTP protocol, they would have to roll out to update every possible kind of a machine out there, and that's a kind of a very long haul task. And interestingly, the gRPC community now realized, so just to quote, gRPC moved away from Google into a kind of a CNCF project, and it is kind of a top level project. So it has graduated, it has its own community that is taking care of the roadmap and kind of decisions, and the community had a look at it, and then took steps to get gRPC available for the browser. And that's when they thought of it, how to get it working, some workarounds with HTTP 1.1, and that's when they have came up with an implementation called gRPC Web. So the gRPC Web kind of has two implementations, one done by Google, another done by the community, and it's pretty exciting choice, I think, for web developers. Like web developers haven't been able to use gRPC. So backend developers, service-to-service communications, we have been taking the benefits of efficiencies delivered by gRPC, but now it is available to web, and I think it's looking great there.
Okay.
So I have one question. So we have discussed, so Shekhar, so you oversee a lot of projects in Xebia, and certain of them are gRPC, certain of them are GraphQL, and while others are kind of REST-based. So I would just like to get your opinion. So which are the popular frameworks that we work in Xebia with them?
Yeah. So the Xebia does a lot of Java development, and Java we are using Spring Boot ecosystem. There we are seeing the adoption of REST. We already know Spring Boot has a inbuilt support for REST, Spring Boot, Spring MVC ecosystem. So we use REST a lot there. On GraphQL also, again, there is a server that you will have to implement, and then you get the integration with Spring Boot is already there. We don't have integration in start.spring.io that a lot of people used to get that. But I feel on a language like or the framework wise, we have support for all of them. So like if you use gRPC, you will get the protocols generated using the in any language that you want to. I don't think is there any language that does not have support for it? I think there's a good story everywhere. Do you want to add something here, Rahul, Akshay?
Um, no, I think you're more or less right. I think the popular project for GraphQL is Apollo, right? So they give you a stack, Apollo server, the client. They have a couple of projects for the database interaction, right, behind a GraphQL server, etc. So yeah, that looks like a fairly interesting project. I haven't worked a lot with it, though.
Yeah, integration does exist. So I don't think we like typically we use Spring Boot both base ecosystem. So integration exists for all of these. So I think the story is quite good. If you want to use today, you can use them today. I think we talked about testing story a bit earlier when Rahul talked about the testing for the REST APIs. Rahul, what's your opinion on gRPC testing? So do you think testing is easy, difficult? How do you see that with gRPC?
Yes, so one thing that gRPC or RPC frameworks allows you is that it gives you an API that you have thought of, but it kind of hides you completely from the underlying implementation. So even though gRPC works on HTTP2, so developers aren't kind of working with the HTTP protocol on their day-to-day needs, and that is where it becomes a little bit tricky. So because when you want to mock a server, you cannot run a kind of a simple HTTP server and get it done and dusted. And if you want to put an API, then again, you would need an additional tooling kind of a thing. So testing, so I'll say that in my experience, testing gRPC service is a little tricky. So it's not as straightforward as REST if I compare. So the protocol is binary, and we cannot make calls using ordinary clients like REST templates. And but on the other hand, the gRPC project provides kind of a gRPC testing library, which can be used for this purpose. So the library provides you kind of in-memory stubs and other kind of utilities that allow you to fork the resources as well as clean them, and once you are done with the tests. And the library has the gRPC testing library has its implementation in kind of across all different languages. It works for Java in JUnit, and in Python it works with unit tests. That's what we mostly have used it.
I think GraphQL also has good testing story. Again, it's not as simple as Spring Boot, REST-based APIs. I think REST APIs are the easiest to test, but I think GraphQL also has support for using graph tools, just easy GraphQL. So there is a testing, but I think it's still not that mature compared to REST. So REST wins there. Akshay, what's the support of API gateways? With REST, we use a lot of different API gateways, but what's with these different API styles like GraphQL and your gRPC? What's the API gateway story?
So GraphQL, no problem, obviously, because it's ultimately just an application layer, on top of HTTP. So, and it's just sending your JSON payloads or standard HTTP payloads. So GraphQL is more or less supported everywhere. Obviously, some of the gateways do special handling of headers for REST APIs, right? So some of that you would probably lose, but it does not a big deal. gRPC is, I guess, more interesting. A lot of the new API gateways do have gRPC support, but gRPC runs on top of HTTP2. And the thing with HTTP2 is by default, it's supposed to have TLS, plain HTTP can still run unsecured. HTTP2 typically runs with TLS enabled, which is why, to get a clear text version of that, they had to come up with H2C, so gRPC kind of relies on that, that's what some of the gateways provide. It's not a standard per se. I think it's something that's evolved over time because people did need it. Like if you had to TLS terminate things at your gateway, right, and you're running HTTP2, well, can you keep running HTTP2 behind the gateway? There's no more TLS. So H2C kind of came in. gRPC kind of uses that, and then most of the standard sort of modern gateways support most of this. Yeah.
I think because gRPC is typically service-to-service communication, so I think API gateway might not also make much sense for it as well. I think, but do you think that like these days we use a lot of service mesh? So does gRPC have a good story with service meshes as well? Have any views on that?
I mean, Rahul might be more familiar with that, but the thing with that's interesting with service meshes is a lot of them use gRPC internally, right?
Okay.
proxy to proxy communication, or however it's running. So Envoy, which is sort of the base for a lot of the new service meshes, definitely heavily uses gRPC for all of its communication. I mean, it makes sense. It's service to service. The payloads are small, so not a problem there. But Rahul, do you have anything to add there?
I think yes. So the latest service meshes all rely heavily on gRPC because it completely makes sense for service to service kind of a talk. So from machines perspective, gRPC is the way that it should be done. But again, H2C has its own kind of things, the issue. So like with the gRPC web, so people are relying gRPC to go to the web. But when you go to the web, you are looking at H2C, and H2C without the TLS things, it's something that people are still waking up. So there are issues there. So there have been security attacks lately around H2C kind of a thing, because it allows you to just forward some request smugglings that you can do there over the H2C. So that's the latest one that was there. So I think from the perspective of support, it works. The latest versions of all API gateways, be it software, be it hardware, they would support gRPC. But again, the organizations would need to invest onto that. So one thing that is kind of we see with our customers is that at times, if they are not kind of onto their complete enterprise transformations kind of a journey, they would kind of have a kind of look back that whether they would really like to adopt it, because it would ask for an upgrade for the infrastructure components.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so I think I have one question for this panel. So I think we have covered very well gRPC and GraphQL, yes, GraphQL as well as REST. So, but how would you decide which one to use? So that's a kind of a question that we often debate with our customers, when to use one style over another. So Shekhar, can you provide some of your thinking? So how do you kind of take it forward?
Sure. I still feel the default should be REST, at least when you're building web APIs. I strongly feel that way, because typically if you are a startup or an organization who is starting their journey, you typically want to focus on one of your devices or one of your set of users. So I think REST make a lot more sense there. What you also have to think about is that they all can fit together, in terms that you can start with REST-based APIs, expose that to customer. If tomorrow you realize that you want to have different API for the mobile, think about backend for front-end approach. Then GraphQL can act as an aggregator sitting in front of your REST APIs. So you can go that route as well. So you don't have to start because GraphQL requires investment. You have to train your developer, you have to start thinking in a different way, which most of the people might not be thinking today. So in my opinion, it might help that you start with REST, then you can incrementally adopt your GraphQL. I think that point was made by Akshay as well, that you can incrementally adopt GraphQL. But GraphQL and REST can work together. So a lot of organizations are exposing their REST APIs as GraphQL APIs later on in the journey. So you can do that. gRPC could be the right way for all service to service communication. But again, if you are using today's like Kubernetes or Istio based environment, then it makes a lot more sense to use gRPC based service to service communication. So I think people have to start thinking away from, I think if you're building microservice architecture and you have a lot of services, start to think about beyond REST. But for web API, still go with REST and then think about GraphQL if you can fit it today. And a lot of tools that exist work directly with REST. So we don't have to think that way. So I still feel that go with REST for your web APIs, incrementally adopt GraphQL, and gRPC should be the default for service to service communication. So that's the approach that we are taking. Akshay, Rahul, do you want to add something here?
I mean, for instance, your point about service to service communication, Netflix probably has as many microservices as sort of any adopter of microservices. They use gRPC heavily. So I mean, the service to service communication with sort of good performance. Certainly because you've pushed so much into the communication layer, right, into your TCP layer. So you do need that sort of performance improvement that you would get with small payloads.
True.
Yeah, I mean, GraphQL and gRPC are nice in that they enforce schema, right? To me, that's a nice thing. Now, again, I wonder if there are any best practices out there for how to define RPC properly, because again, it's RPC. You could just do it the old SOAP way, where you just keep defining lots and lots of methods. So I haven't come across that. I haven't looked at that literature, which tells me how do you design RPC API. But yeah, I'm sure some practices around it.
Yeah. Rahul, any concluding remarks from you?
Okay, for me as well, I think for our customers, we work with REST. That's our kind of way forward, that let's pick REST, and then the Richard maturity model at level 3 is kind of what you try to implement, because that is what we see that it's still not very straightforward. So it's still, you could go wrong at multiple places. So you have to be cautious with that. But on the other hand, we have worked with kind of gRPC as well. So one of our customers, which we for Vim, we made an engine. So there were kind of internal services. So we built it service, because it was all about service to service kind of a talk. And then it made sense to go with kind of a gRPC kind of a framework. So because there were certain things there, the customer has its own system, they could control the APIs, and they would need not to deprecate them, because when you build an API, you need to think around, okay, how do I deprecate them? So that is especially true with public facing APIs. True. So if you have a public facing APIs, then we don't recommend gRPC, because for a public facing API, it becomes very difficult to call it over the wire, and and they are not even kind of you cannot hit them with the curl command kind of thing. So it becomes a little difficult there for public facing APIs. But if you have built a service within the ecosystem, and that is rightly under your control, I would preferably go with gRPC. So that's what Shekhar would said that initially as well, that for internal services, we prefer gRPC, but for exposing it kind of over the wire, we would go with the REST, and maybe aggregated with REST as Richard said model 3, and maybe aggregated to GraphQL.
I think great, Eric. Great. Thanks, Rahul and Akshay. So that's it for today's podcast. So I think that's the first episode that we have done. We will be doing this every fortnight. So we will call up different industry experts, and we will have discussion with them on different topics. Again, topics will be all on software development. We will cover DevOps, we will cover Kubernetes, cloud native, and all those things as we move along. Please follow our podcast, subscribe to it, give us feedback so that we can improve. And thanks a lot, everyone, for your time.
Sure.